Minister, the latest information available to your department confirms that the drug usage across the state is at an all-time high. The steps being taken by your department to address the deepening crisis, and if you will make a statement on the matter. Minister, I am shocked to see the extent of the use of drugs in Ireland in all sectors of communities, young, old, male and female. There is no boundaries.
Thanks, Deputy. The Government is acutely aware of the sustained and significant damage that drug dealing has in communities across the country. Organised criminal activity, including drug dealing, represents a serious threat to community safety and indeed to individuals. As the Deputy will be aware, the Department of Health leads on government policy in the area of drugs, and this policy is guided by the National Drugs and Alcohol Strategy, which is reducing harm, supporting recovery, a health-led response to drug and alcohol use in Ireland, and that plan is from 2017 to 2025. This strategy represents a whole-of-government response to drug and alcohol use in Ireland, and implementation is led by my colleague, the Minister of State at the Department of Health, Frank Feehan, and encompasses actions for all stakeholders, and this of course includes Garda Síochána and my own department in Justice. The Government's strategic approach is health-led to try and reduce the demand while balancing this with reducing access to illegal drugs. It also aims to reduce the number of the numbers criminalised for the possession of drugs for personal use, diverting these people to health and diversion treatments to address their habits and their behaviours. While the strategy aims to support the most vulnerable people who use drugs, it's also matched with very strong enforcement measures across government to try and tackle the supply of illegal drugs. I share the Garda Commissioner's concern and your concern at the prevalence of illegal drug use, and I'm glad that sustained action by Garda Síochána to tackle this continued apace throughout the pandemic, resulting in increased convictions and ongoing seizures of drugs, as well as volumes of firearms, ammunition and cash that inevitably accompany this very serious organised criminal activity. The Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau have significant success in disrupting drug trafficking and the supply of illicit drugs by organised crime groups, and I'm advised that the Garda authorities that in 2021 they seized almost €64 million worth of illicit drugs, over €5.6 million in cash, a significant increase from 2019 where there was just over 21 million, which is obviously still a significant amount worth of illicit drugs, and over 2.5 million in cash seized, but obviously quite a significant increase. The Bureau's work is supported by the Divisional Drugs Units nationwide and by all Gardaí who work in our local communities. They also work closely and productively with the international law enforcement powers, which is really important here. Gardaí work closely with local authorities, the HSE, our NGOs, our community groups and other state agencies to try and tackle the problems of drug addiction and drug abuse. Obviously it's an ongoing issue, but it requires that sustained ongoing support from Garda Síochána.
Minister, you said at your Justice Plan 2022 that you want to make a real difference in people's lives. More Garda on the beat would really make a difference in rural communities nationwide. Minister, do you realise that the Newcastle West Garda station closed down 3 years ago to go to a temporary station? The divisional headquarters takes in the greater proportion of County Limerick. The new Garda station has not even commenced. A Skeeton Garda station is only open for administrative use only. Minister, how can we be serious about a Garda division in our area, when Newcastle West, with the population of Newcastle West and the surrounding district of Newcastle West, which it covers, and we don't even have a Garda headquarters? It was closed down 3 years ago to build a state-of-the-art new Garda station, and it hasn't commenced yet. So how do I take it seriously that you want to help me tackle drugs, crime in County Limerick, if you haven't even given me a Garda station, the divisional Garda station, and it hasn't even commenced after closing down the Newcastle West one 3 years ago?
Well, firstly, I would say in terms of Garda numbers, we have seen an increase across every county in the country, and Limerick is no different. So we've gone from 596 members of all ranks assigned to the Limerick division, which is a 7.6% increase since 2015. As well as that, you have an increase in Garda staff. So we've gone from 51 to 78, which is an increase of 52%, which obviously allows more Gardaí out on the beat. So it's really important, yes, that we have that physical building, that we have a capital plan, which I'm working on at the moment, working closely with the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, with the Garda Commissioner also. But it's important that it's not just about buildings, it's about making sure that we have the Gardaí out on the ground. It's also about making sure that we have the right policies and legislation in place. So you mentioned the plan this week, and specifically when I think about organised crime, when I think about the connection with drugs, when I think about the younger people who are now being dragged into this as well, there's a number of actions in that plan. We have a plan to criminalise those who groom younger people. This is legislation that I brought brought forward last year that we're working on at the moment. We have a plan to make sure that we have life sentences for those we have life sentences essentially for those who attempt murder, but where obviously are not successful. And we have a number of other pieces of legislation and policy reforms to try and deal with the substance of this, separate to the police, the numbers, the equipment, the supports, the resources that they have on the ground as well.
Minister, 596 Gardaí were allocated to Limerick. 92 of those were super, detectives and sergeants. 7,596 uniformed Gardaí in the whole country out of 8,539 if you take out the detectives out of that. But how can you explain that with a population of 1.4 million in Dublin that they take 44% of the new recruits? When there's a population of over 5 million in Ireland, that is not proportionate into the proper area. Again, how do you expect us to police our counties when 44% of the Gardaí are deployed into Dublin? And if you go by population, there's 1.4 million. That leaves 3.6 million people to have 56% of the Gardaí that are redeployed, even though we might be travelling 40 square miles, some of the Garda stations, to cover some of the districts, and you've deployed most of the Gardaí have come into Dublin.
As the Deputy will appreciate, obviously the deployment of Gardaí and where they go and the resources and how they're deployed is a matter for the Garda Commissioner. What I need to make sure is that as Minister for Justice, the resources are there, that I suppose the Gardaí are coming out of Templemore, and the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that we have over 10,000 people have applied for the recent Garda recruitment campaign. I think it's very welcome, and obviously the more of those we see coming out on the beat, on the ground as quickly as possible, the more they can be spread across the country, not just into areas of high density and high population, which of course you're referring to Dublin there. So there are a number of things that we can do to try and deal with not just the issue of drugs, but so much connected with that, the issue of criminality, gangs, as I've said, younger people who are now being dragged into it, the impact it has on our communities, and just to mention another way in which we're trying to deal with that, the Community Safety Partnership, which has been rolled out in 3 pilot areas, but which will come with it a fund, money that is coming specifically from I suppose drugs and other things that have been seized by the Gardaí. This will be funding available to communities to be able to implement schemes in their towns, in their villages, to try and keep them safe. So it's about Gardaí working with all of our state agencies, but also working with communities to make sure that the supports and the resources are there that suit their needs as well, because what people need in Limerick might be different to what people need in Meath, might be different to what people need in other counties as well. Thank you.